These are the notes for section 3.3 part 1. Basically what these are is a lot of word problems that involve systems of equations, and they get into some more complex ones than the ones we've looked at so far. So you should have a note sheet for this. Go ahead and pause this if you need some time to pass it out. And our first example is actually the same example that we had in 3.1. So it's about the endangered and threatened birds in the United States. It says in 2012 there were 92 species of birds in the United States that were considered threatened or endangered. The number of species considered threatened was 3 less than 1/4 of the number considered endangered. Write a system of equations that models the number of U.S. bird species considered endangered or threatened in 2012, which we've already done, and then we're going to solve it to find how many were endangered and how many were threatened. So the first thing we want to do in doing any of these types of problems is define our variables. So I'm going to use here is that T is the number of species that are considered threatened, and E is the number of species considered endangered. And we've actually already written a system of equations for this. So the system that we wrote was that the number of threatened plus the number endangered equals 92, because they told us that the total was 92. And then our second equation was that the number threatened is 3 less than 1/4 of the number endangered. So the number threatened, we need to take 1/4 of the number endangered, so 1/4 E, and then we need 3 less than that, so -3. That's 3 less than 1/4 of the number considered endangered. So we've actually already done that before, but now we're actually going to go ahead and solve this. What I'm thinking is that substitution would probably be a good method for this. I already know that T is the same thing as 1/4 E minus 3. So I'm just going to plug that in for T into my other equation. So I'm going to rewrite this first equation here, but instead of T, I'm going to write 1/4 E minus 3. And then I'll write the rest of it the same. Plus E equals 92. We just need to, let's see, I'll combine my like terms first. So a 4th E plus 1 E is 1 1/4 E. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and add 3 to each side as well. I'm just going to do that in one step. So that equals 95. Now I need to get E by itself. To do that, we don't really want a mixed number here, so let's turn that into an improper fraction. So 1 1/4 is 5/4. So I really have 5/4 E equals 95. So to get rid of a fraction next to a variable, remember we multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 4/5 on both sides here. And then when we solve that, if you were doing this in a calculator, you could type 95 times 4, hit enter, divided by 5, hit enter. Whenever you're multiplying by a fraction, just multiply by the top, hit enter, divide by the bottom, hit enter. And I believe you end up getting that 76 species is E, so that's the number endangered. So there's 76 species that are endangered. Now I just need to use that in one of my two equations to find what my other variable T is. So I'm going to come up here now. I know that T plus E is 92. And I know that E is 76. So I know that T plus 76 is 92. So I just plugged in 76 for E right there in that equation. So we just subtract 76 from each side, and we get that T is 16. So we want to make sure and write our answer out very clearly here. So we want to say that there are 76 endangered species and there are 16 threatened species. All right, we're going to do 3 more word problems together before you guys have a chance to work on your homework. So this next one is also one that we've looked at before. We just wrote the system, we didn't solve it. So we've got this jewelry design place, Boulder Flatirons jewelry design. They purchased 80 beads for a total of $39 to make a necklace. Some of the beads were sterling silver, those were 40 cents each, and the rest were gemstones, which were 65 cents each. We're going to write this into a system of equations, and then we're going to solve it to find how many of each type of bead were bought. So the first thing we need to do is pick our variables. So we're looking for how many of each type of bead were bought. Those are going to be our two variables. So let's see. We don't know how many silver beads were bought. I'm going to use X instead of S because we don't like using S's. They look like 5s. So X is the number of silver beads. And I'm going to let G equal the number of gemstones. So in our system, first we know the total beads was 80. So in my system, I know that the number of silver, X, plus the number of gemstones equals 80 beads total. Then we can also write an equation about the cost of these. So I know that my silver ones were 40 cents each. So I do 40 cents per silver bead, so times the number of silver beads, X, plus 65 cents per gemstone, so 0.65 G, 65 cents times the number of gemstones, and that equals the total amount they spent, which was $39. Now, you might be looking at this equation and thinking you really don't want to deal with all those decimals, and I kind of agree. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this. I'm going to keep the first equation in my system the same, X plus G equals 80. And my second one, I'm going to make it all in cents. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything by 100, which means to move the decimal to the right 2 places. So I'm going to make this 40x plus 65g equals 3,900. That way you just get rid of the decimals. You solve it just as usual. So you can pick right now if you want to do substitution or elimination to solve this. As you guys know, I like elimination. I'm thinking elimination looks good on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my top equation by negative 40. So I'm going to have negative 40x minus 40g equals negative 3,200. I'm just going to keep my bottom equation exactly the same because that will make those x's cancel. So I've got 40x plus 65g equals 3,900. So when I add those up, my x's cancel out. And I'm going to go through and add up the rest here. So negative 40g plus 65g is 25g. And that equals 700. Negative 3,200 plus 3,900 is 700. Then we just divide by 25 on each side, and we end up with g equals 28. So now we know there's 28 gemstones. So we just need to plug this into one of our equations. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in our first equation, this one right here. X plus G equals 80. So I'm going to write X plus 28 equals 80. And then we just need to subtract 28 from each side to find out what X is. So we are left with X equals 52. So we want to write this nicely here to answer the question. We know that there are 52 sterling silver beads and 28 gemstone beads. All right, so I think your book calls those two type of equations total amount equations. What we're going to move on to next is an equation that kind of combines some things and makes a blend of things. So let's look at that. A tea store on Pearl Street sells loose oolong tea, I think that's how you pronounce that, oolong, for $2.15 per ounce. Donna mixed oolong tea with shaved almonds that sell for 95 cents per ounce to create the Market Street Oolong Blend that sells for $1.85 per ounce. So they sell it, it doesn't cost the price of adding the two up. It's a little different. So this 1 week she made 300 ounces total. So she's combining these two things to get 300 ounces of the blend of Market Street Oolong. I should have put Market Street Oolong Blend right there. How much tea and how much shaved almonds did she use to make this blend? So what I'm going to do here, this is kind of a complicated one. I'm going to make a little table to start this out. So I'm going to think about the number of ounces of each that she used, the price per ounce, and then the value, or like the total price per ounce for each of these things. So we've got kind of three things going on here. We've got the plain old oolong tea, we've got the shaved almonds, and then we've got this Market Street, I'm just going to put MS blend, the Market Street blend. So on my table here, I don't know how many ounces of oolong tea and how many ounces of almonds she has individually. I know altogether it adds up to 300 ounces in that blend because they told me she had 300 ounces. So let's pick some variables to use for the ounces of oolong tea and the ounces of shaved almonds. For oolong, I don't really want to use O, or I prefer not to use L because it looks like 0 and 1. So I'm just going to use N, the first letter, and then it doesn't look like a 0 or 1. And for almonds, I'll use A. Now we know that for oolong tea, it's $2.15 per ounce. That came from the problem. And we know that the almonds are 95 cents per ounce, and that the blend ends up being $1.85 per ounce. So let's think of how we could write the value or the total price of each of those things. So for oolong tea, we're paying $2.15 times the number of ounces of oolong tea, so 2.15 N. Same for the almonds. We're paying 95 cents times the number of ounces of almonds. And for the blend, we're paying $1.85 per ounce, and we know we have 300 ounces. So for this one, I'm just going to do 300 times $1.85, and I end up getting $555. So I know that when I add up the oolong tea plus the almond ounces, I get 300 ounces total. So there's one of my equations. Just N plus A equals 300. Ounces of oolong plus ounces of almonds equals 300. And I know from this last one, I can't really get anything from the second row, but in the last one, I know that if I add up 215 times the times the ounces of oolong tea, plus 95 cents times the number of almonds, I end up getting, I can barely fit it on there, $555. That says 555. So those are the two equations I'm going to use in my system here. I know this might seem so tough right now, but when you do a lot of these, you'll start getting used to it. So on your homework, the big thing I want to emphasize here is that you just need to be trying every problem. You can't just write a question mark. Okay, that's not acceptable. You have to write a bunch of stuff and try and figure it out. Try something. That's the only way you're going to learn. And here's my other equation. 215N plus 0.95A equals 555. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to multiply, let's multiply this bottom equation. Let's multiply everything by 100 to move that decimal place 2 spots, just to make it look a little nicer here. So I'm really going to write my system as, let's keep the first one the same, N plus A equals 300. And our second one, let's just make it 215N plus 95A equals 55,500. I just multiplied all the things in this one by 100, so I wouldn't have any more decimals. I need to move the decimals 2 spots. So now you can decide how you want to solve this. Just since we've did elimination before, I'm going to go ahead and do substitution on this one. So if I use this first equation here, I can subtract A from each side. So I know that N is equal to 300 minus A. So all I did there was subtracted A from each side, and now I know that N is the same as 300 minus A. So I can plug that in for N in my other equation, not the one I used already. So I'm going to rewrite the second equation with that N plugged in. So it's 215 times 300 minus A, that's N, plus 95A equals 55,500. So now what I'm going to need to do here is do some distributing. So I'm going to do 215 times 300, that is 64,500. 215 times negative A, that's just negative 215A. And then I just write the rest out here. Plus 95A equals 55,500. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things at once here. I'm going to combine these like terms. Negative 215A plus 95A is negative 120A. And then I'm also going to subtract 64,500 from each side. So what I'm going to be left with here is negative 120A equals this subtraction, which is negative 9,000. So now what I need to do is just divide by negative 120. And I'm left with A equals 75. So remember, A meant the ounces of shaved almonds. So we know that she got 75 ounces of shaved almonds. And then we just need to plug that back into one of our equations to find how many ounces of oolong tea she got. So we know from this equation that all together she had 300 ounces of stuff. So, well, 300 minus the 75 almonds gives us 225 ounces of oolong tea. So we know that she got 225 ounces of the oolong to make that blend. I'm not going to lie, that was a tough problem. All right, so go back and watch this video later if you need to. All right, we got one more. It's on the back. Let's do it. Oh, man, I'm recording this thing. It's, let's see, 4:55 right now in the evening, and the sunset is so beautiful over the Flatiron right now. I wish I could take a picture and put it on here. All right, so one more. Let's do it. All right, Rick's student loans totaled $9,600. Wow, Rick's a lucky guy. It's not very much. Part was a plus loan, which was 7.9% interest. And the rest of it was a Stafford loan, which was 6.8% interest. So he's going to end up paying more than $9,600. He's got to pay interest on these loans too. After a year, his loans accumulated $702.30 in interest. What was the original amount of each loan? So let's think about what two things we're looking at here. We're thinking about, well, how much was each loan? So let's pick our variables here. I'm going to use that P is the amount of the plus loan, like how much did he loan out from this plus loan place? And then let's say T is the amount for the Stafford loan. I just used T because I didn't want to use S. So we've got these two things going on, the plus loan, which we're going to call P, and the Stafford loan, which we'll call T. We know that all together, his loans were $9,600. So that's going to be my first equation here. P plus T, the amount of the plus the amount of the Stafford, equals $9,600. Now, we know that when we take 7.9% of P, that's going to give us the interest on P. So I'm going to do 7.9%, which is 0.079 P. That's going to give us 7.9% of P. Plus, I need to do 6.8% of the Stafford loan. So 0.068 T. That gives us 6.8% of that. If I add up those 2%, the two interest amounts, I get the total interest, which should be $702.30. So there's my system of equations. It looks really yucky because I've got all these decimals in it. So I think what I need to do is, what I would like to do is move my decimal actually 1, 2, 3 spots to get rid of it. So I'm going to rewrite this system. I'm going to keep the first equation the same. But in the second one, I'm going to move the decimal 3 spots in every number. I'm multiplying by 1,000. So it's going to be 79P plus 68T equals 702,300. All right. You can solve however you want. I'm going to switch back and do elimination on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my first equation. I'm not going to leave it the same, actually. I'm going to multiply this one by negative 79 because then my p's would cancel out. So I'm going to have negative 79p minus 79t equals, I've got to do 9,600 times negative 79. and I get negative 758,400. We're working with big numbers, but it's just the same math we've been doing. So I'm going to kind of like draw a little squiggly line here, like, all right, I'm kind of done with that equation above there because I changed it down here. So my p's cancel. And let's see, I've got 68t minus 79t, and that I believe is negative 11t. Equals negative, I'm going to add up those two numbers, 702,300 minus 758,400, and I get negative 56,100 there. So I just need to divide each side by negative 11, and I'm left with t equals 5,100. So I know that he borrowed $5,100 in that Stafford loan because that's what T meant. And then we just need to plug that in our equation. Let's plug it in our first one right here. We know that his loans totaled $9,600. So I just need to do 9,600 minus the amount of his first loan, 5,100, and I get that he borrowed 4,500 in his other loan, which was that plus loan. So he borrowed 4,500 in the other loan, which was called plus. All right, so you guys have 4 homework problems. Please, please, please try all of them. Even if you're really confused, just try it. Try to write equations. Try to solve them. Try something. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.